This story happened when I was 22, during a weekend camping trip with my two best friends, Chris and Amanda. Even now, whenever I hear the rustle of leaves at night, I can't help but feel the hair on my neck stand on end. It was supposed to be an escape from our busy city lives, but what we encountered deep in the woods of the Blue Ridge Mountains is something I'll never forget. We arrived at the trailhead late in the afternoon and decided to set up camp before it got dark. The woods were quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustling of squirrels. It was peaceful, almost unnervingly so. As night fell, we sat around the fire, telling ghost stories and laughing at how ridiculous they were. That's when we heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping sound coming from deeper in the forest. At first, we brushed it off as some animal, but then the tapping grew louder and more deliberate, like someone knocking on wood with a stick. Amanda joked about the ghost of the woods, but there was an edge to her voice that betrayed her unease. The next morning, we decided to explore a little further down the trail. Chris, ever the adventurer, insisted on taking a detour when we stumbled upon an overgrown path. "It'll be fun," he said. "Who knows what we'll find?" Reluctantly, Amanda and I followed. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our boots crunching leaves. And then we saw it, an old abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. The wood was rotting, and the windows were boarded up, but the door hung slightly ajar. Against our better judgment, we decided to take a look inside. The cabin was empty, save for a few broken chairs and a table. But what caught our attention was the writing on the walls. Scrawled in black, jagged letters were words like, "Help me, and don't follow it." The air inside was suffocating, thick with the smell of mildew and something metallic. Then Amanda screamed. We turned to see her pointing at a shadow moving outside the window. Chris bolted to the door and looked out, but there was no one there. We decided it was time to head back. As we retraced our steps, the forest seemed different. The trees felt closer, the path narrower, and then we realized we were lost. The trail we had followed to the cabin was gone, replaced by dense underbrush. Panic set in as the sky darkened. That's when we heard the tapping again, louder and closer this time. We started running, crashing through the underbrush, desperate to find our way back. The tapping followed us, relentless and unyielding. Finally, we burst out onto the main trail, panting and covered in scratches. We didn't stop running until we reached our car. To this day, I don't know what we encountered in those woods, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that tapping. I had just moved to Oregon and was eager to explore the state's famous forests. One weekend, I decided to hike in the Tillamook State Forest. I planned a solo trip, a way to clear my head and connect with nature. Looking back, I wish I had brought someone with me. The first day was uneventful. I set up camp near a stream, cooked dinner, and enjoyed the serenity of the woods. As night fell, I crawled into my tent and drifted off to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of rustling outside. At first I thought it was an animal, but then I heard a voice. It was faint and distant, like someone calling out, "Hello?" I unzipped my tent and shone my flashlight into the darkness. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called back. There was no response, just the sound of the wind in the trees. Uneasy, I climbed back into my tent and tried to sleep. The next morning I decided to pack up and move deeper into the forest. As I hiked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Several times I stopped and looked around, but there was no one there. Then, I stumbled upon another campsite. It looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. The tent was collapsed, and the fire pit was cold. But the strangest thing was the notebook I found lying on the ground. The pages were filled with frantic, almost illegible handwriting. Most of it didn't make sense, but one phrase was repeated over and over. "Don't look for it. It sees you." Chilled, I decided to head back to my car. But the further I walked, the less familiar the trail seemed. Trees that I could have sworn I passed earlier now looked different. The path twisted in ways I didn't remember. And then I saw him, a man standing in the distance, half hidden behind a tree. He wasn't moving, just staring at me. I froze, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out. He didn't respond, didn't move, and then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. I ran. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get out. Somehow, I found my way back to the trailhead in my car. As I drove away, I looked in my rearview mirror and thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the woods watching me. To this day, I'll never go hiking alone again. Last summer, my girlfriend Emily and I decided to spend a weekend camping in the Adirondacks. We'd heard about a beautiful, secluded spot near Pine Lake and thought it would be the perfect getaway. It was a decision we would come to regret. The first night was magical. We set up our tent near the lake, cooked dinner over a campfire, and watched the stars. But as we sat by the fire, we began to hear whispers. At first, we thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to come from the trees, surrounding us. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, trying to stay calm. "It's just the wind," I said, though I didn't believe it. The next day, we decided to explore the area. As we hiked, we noticed strange carvings on some of the trees, symbols we didn't recognize, almost like runes. Emily took a picture of one, but when we looked at it later, the symbols didn't show up in the photo, just the tree. That night, the whispers returned, louder and closer. It sounded like dozens of voices, speaking in a language we couldn't understand. Then, around midnight, we heard footsteps outside our tent. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling us. I grabbed the flashlight and unzipped the tent, but there was no one there. We didn't sleep that night. As soon as the sun rose, we packed up and started hiking back to the car. But the forest seemed different, darker. The trail that had been so clear before now felt twisted and confusing. Then we saw them, figures standing among the trees just out of reach. They didn't move, didn't make a sound, but we could feel their eyes on us. Panic set in, and we started running. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, until we burst out onto the road where our car was parked. We never spoke about what happened that weekend, but sometimes, when the wind rustles the trees, I swear I can still hear those whispers.